Welcome back to the VHS Club, to our double feature week where we are talking all about OG slasher flicks. I think that's the best way to describe it, right? Friday the 13th and Halloween. So we have made it to Halloween. Nat, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. We watched this, actually, it's funny because Katie and I were watching this yesterday, texting back and forth the whole time. So it was almost like we did like a live viewing together.
I know. At some point we need
way
to
through, it's like we should have just done this, watching it live. We basically did the podcast yesterday.
This was my fault. We have Dan hanging out in the chat being like, hey, hang on a second, it's Friday. It's Friday. It's usually my fault when things go horribly awry. I didn't pull off yesterday, but I wanted to be able to actually really watch this movie, so I finished watching it actually this morning, like early this morning. So thanks to everyone for putting up with our being a night off. But I'm glad we did 2 in a week. I don't think I could do 2 in a week often, but I feel like it's now like both movies are so fresh in my mind that we'll be able to do a really good comparison tonight. So, and Nat dove like way in for tonight, so
I went down
take it away.
an internet rabbit hole yesterday. So I watched the movie and then I'm like, I have questions. And it took me down a very deep tunnel on the internet, which I found there is a very intense debate about the psychology of Michael Myers online, and how apparently most people think that his only motivation for killing is that he is the embodiment of evil and not that he actually has any reason to kill. Which I was like, other than in the opening scene, where as a child, he sees his sister, who's supposed to be babysitting him, neglect him to have sex with her boyfriend upstairs.
You're like,
and he decides
reasons.
that I'm like, and that traumatizes him as a kid because he's neglected because his sister / babysitter is having sex instead of watching him. I'm like, that's motivation, guys. Because he is, I mean, not to dive too deep into actual psychology, but I'm like, Michael Myers presents as a sociopath and a psychopath, which is pretty rare to have like both in one. He's also extremely intelligent, which is characteristic to both, but I'm like, no, he has all the motivation, but the internet does not agree with me. I think Katie and I stand alone with the fact that he has motivation for killings because he only kills babysitters, especially if they have sex.
Yeah.
In this movie, it flashes from when he's a 6-year-old kid and he ends up murdering his sister because she neglected him while babysitting, to 15 years later, he's now 21 and he breaks out of the mental institution that he was imprisoned in. And he goes back to his hometown on Halloween night, which is his birthday. Or no, yes, Halloween night, which is his birthday. And he goes to kill he quickly finds and stalks, the local.
He finds some babysitters because
teen
apparently
sweetheart babysitter, and decides to kill off all the babysitters.
Yeah. Which, if you've seen this movie, and we have a few people hanging out in our live chat, even though we threw everyone for a loop, so let us know if you've seen this one or what your feelings and thoughts are on this one. But my immediate, and if you have not been here before, or if you do not remember this fun fact about me, I am one of the least observant people ever. So if something happens in the movie that like I'm not blatantly supposed to know, I've missed it. But this movie, I was like super observant.
Hyper observant Katie was yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, gold medal for observance.
Gold medal for
Katie.
me. I know, I win.
She
missed
shit. I was like, I didn't notice that until you pointed it out.
So both Nat and I'm proud to say that I noticed this, have so many questions about this town and Halloween. So here are a few of the ones that we had. Let us know if you have these questions as well. One is that there's no trick-or-treating, like the kids aren't trick-or-treating. Why? How come no one's taking these kids out for candy? And then the second one I had
the
was
kids
like
being babysat.
Yeah, the kids being
other
babysat.
Kids were trick-or-treating, but the kids that were being babysat did not get to go out trick-or-treating.
They didn't get to go trick-or-treating, and they had like terrible babysitters, except for the kid that Lori was watching. But and then my other question is like, where are all the parents? Like, as a parent of those age kids myself, like are they just at an overnight party? Like, are they
out of town for the weekend?
Are they all out of town?
Friday night?
Is this like because
I'm like, the babysitters had no sort of reaction or acknowledgement to the fact that the parents are going to be coming home at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, they clearly thought that, like, they were clearly
Yeah.
acting as though they were all going to put these kids to bed. Like, and they were totally, taking all of the
And that the
advantage,
parents
assuming
weren't
the
coming
parents
home.
weren't
Like,
coming home. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I've like these one of the quote unquote babysitters, she decides to go over to the house that her friend is babysitting at to have sex with her boyfriend
Sure. Yeah, as you do.
while the kid is asleep and her friend is downstairs and she's talking on the phone with their other friend Lori, who's babysitting. Is the plan. That's the plan. And they go over, nobody's home, so they essentially break into this house and they go and have sex in this house. And then of course they get murdered by Nikki. But so my question is, like, these kids had no like, they didn't seem to acknowledge the fact that somebody's going to be home. They're taking their time. They were drinking, they were having sex, they weren't rushed, they weren't hurried, they weren't like, no concept of ramifications of getting in trouble. Like,
There's also
of
like
course we were gonna
no
die.
neighbors around whatsoever. Like,
No.
which, I mean, I guess is
Well,
part of
they were out trick or treating with their kids.
is part of the no, but this is later. Like, is part of like the kind of slasher
Yeah.
trope, or like the guidelines for slasher movies. One of the things that we talked about last episode was that you're kind of in this setting where you're really isolated, right? And so in Friday the 13th, we saw
Yeah.
all of these camp counselors were at Camp Crystal Lake. There was no one around. The camp
It's a
wasn't open
sleepaway
yet. It was
camp.
like,
Yeah.
the sleepaway camp in the middle of nowhere. Whereas this movie takes place in like a like fairly busy
Suburban
neighborhood
neighborhood.
on
Yeah.
Halloween night. And like,
Yeah.
I'm willing to buy into that. I'm willing to buy into the fact
And
that
apparently
that
the
it
cops are out and about patrolling because the psychiatrist who had locked up and has been treating 6-year-old, now 20-year-old Michael Myers has not only called the police to warn them that this crazed man is coming to kill everybody,
Mhm.
he has showed up in town to get the police to be like, look, he's here to murder people. I have proof of this. Look, there's my stolen car. Like, so there's apparently the police are all patrolling too, but we don't see them and they're not anywhere near a house where there's a babysitter.
And there's no one else home. Like, when at like nearing the end of the movie, when Laurie, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, is like running for her life and Michael Myers is slow walk chasing her down, she's
Yeah.
like banging on every door. She's like throwing things at the houses. No one is home. Like, no one is home.
No.
No one hears her screaming, which again, I get that it's part of a kind of the trope of these movies, and I'm in for it. I love
Wait,
these
yeah.
movies, but I was just like, where, like, is this neighborhood okay? Like, where are these people? Because like, they've already had this like horrific murder, like 21 years earlier or whatever it was, in their
15 years.
neighborhood, or 15 years earlier, but
Yeah.
they, yeah. So I'm like, I'm just worried for this neighborhood.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just,
50
yeah.
years really erased everybody in this town's memory, except for, ironically, the little kid that Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie, is babysitting. At the beginning of the movie, she's going to, her dad's the town realtor,
Mm,
and she's dropping off a key in the mailbox because people are going to go visit the house because he's trying to sell it.
yeah.
And the little kid that she's babysitting later that night is like, oh, you shouldn't go near that house. Only bad things happen if you go near that house. So
Gotta
anybody who
trust the
goes near it,
kid.
bad things happen to. Like I said on Tuesday's episode about slasher movies and Friday the 13th, always listen to the kid at the beginning of the movie or the old person.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. If there's like an
always.
old creepy person, that's
Yeah.
the person you listen to if as a kid. And
Or a kid telling you something wiser beyond their years. Listen to them.
in this case, also the doctor, who again, like, I think is my
Yeah.
favorite character in this movie, because as you said, like, not
I
only
have
does
so
he
many questions about him.
does it not only does he, like, at the beginning of the movie, he has this comment where he's just like, we should never let this man out. Like, this man stays in prison or in the mental institution for forever.
Yeah,
And then
not
when
even
he
to take him to court. He's
not
like, if
even,
we
yeah,
take him to
he would
court,
rather not take him to court. Like,
he
he just
needs to be
doesn't.
fully sedated and catatonic. Like, that's the only way we could get him
Yeah.
to go to court. I'm assuming because he was locked up since he was 6 years old, Mikey.
Yeah.
That I'm assuming that now that he's 21, his sentence needs to be revisited.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Because the doctor obviously didn't sign off that he's okay to get out. Because I know juvenile cases, sometimes they let even child serial killers out when they turn of age because they say your brain chemistry changes so much that it's possible that they won't repeat, or likely they won't repeat that kind of behavior when they mature. Regardless, I'm like, I'd still keep a really close eye on
Well,
like
see, you would want this
kids who
doctor
had
in your neighborhood
murdered
because
people.
he was like, not only did he just like drive himself to the
Yeah,
house and like stand in front of it with his gun in his pocket, like he was just like ready. He's
yeah.
like, I'm gonna save all of these children from them. But yeah, I don't know. I thoroughly enjoyed I enjoyed him as a character.
I did question like why, because so the doctor shows up to the mental institution to sedate Mikey so he could take him to court.
Hmm.
And everybody's broken, all the patients are broken out. There seems to be no staff anywhere. Um and all in the pouring rain, all of the
They're standing in
patients
white
in the mental
robes in the
institution
pouring rain.
are, well, hospital gowns, and they're
Yeah.
like wandering around like zombies in the front yard.
Yep.
But and then Mikey attacks the nurse and steals the car. But he lets her live, which I'm like lends to he has a very specific motivation to
He's
get
got
to
a
his
type.
hometown babysitters because he
Yeah.
wasn't interested in killing anybody else. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, but this doctor, I'm like, so he informs the hospital director, tells him that he screwed up and that it's his fault because that's true, and then he calls the police from the hospital and says, "Hey, this guy's on the loose.
He
I
does
know
all
he's
the right
coming there.
things.
He's my
Yeah.
patient. He's gonna kill people." I'm like, so that's basically like now it's the police's responsibility. But no, for some crazy reason, he chases a sociopath like across the state to go and stop him
Well,
from killing other people. Like what?
the
I would have been like,
police.
job done. I called the police. I told the director of the hospital my responsibility has been fulfilled until they catch him again. Like, but
Yeah.
no, this doctor goes after Mikey. I was like, oh, this is too much.
I do. Hanging out here with our live studio audience, and I do love a couple of these comments. So the first is Doc says, "No, we did not have helicopter parents at this point, so the parents were just like
No.
gone," which
Yeah.
is I guess
Facts. Yeah, that's true.
a good defense for why there were no parents around. And Travis agrees with you, Nat. Travis says, "I love how the sheriff is responding to a store break-in where a mask, rope, and knives were stolen, and it's like."
Right?
Nothing suspicious about this at all. It's very true. It's like Halloween night and they're like, teenagers always doing teenager things when they know like
School masks and knives.
it's
It's
not that
fine.
big a town. At that point, they know that there is an escaped mental patient whose house is in that town and they're like, this is fine. It's probably
Which also,
teenagers.
like, this town there's no way that this community, who seems very, like, small town, like, Illinois, like, there's no way they were not rocked by a 6-year-old kid brutally murdering his sister
Yeah.
with a kid like a chef's knife,
Yeah.
like there's no way that like they're like, oh, it's only been 15 years, we just totally forgot about all of that. They be more on edge, be like, shit, he's coming back, like this is bad.
I know, yeah, the town should have been ready.
Wrong reaction.
I also feel like the house would have been torn down. I mean, and this is sad, but when I was a kid growing up, or when Nat and I were kids growing up,
Yeah.
there was a murder case in not the town that we lived in, but a few towns over, and they had to tear that house
Well,
down because
a few suburbs over,
yeah,
that's
no
the
one would
yeah.
live there. Like they were like, nope, we're not like.
And it
So
wasn't like a serial case, it
no,
was just a
it was
brutal
just a brutal
case.
killing, yeah, and
It
so
was a yeah.
yeah, so
Ugh.
I mean again, I know that this all works for the movie, so this is just us poking fun, but
Yes.
it definitely was like you're like, "Huh, so you're still trying to sell this house, huh?" Like it's been
Probably
a
been
really
15
long
years.
time, but hey,
It's like
maybe
nobody
they'll remember.
remembers, we could sell it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I so in the classic trope of slashers, one of the babysitters, Annie, she's not a very good babysitter. She's actually very rude and like borderline not a good friend even.
Mhm.
And um she's making popcorn and she's melting butter on the stove. She splashes herself and she decides, I'm going to get fully naked
Yeah.
to wash my clothes, which also, this was one of my questions. So she goes to wash her shirt and her jeans,
Hmm.
and the washer and dryer, like the laundry room in this fairly large looking suburban home, is outside.
Yeah, I think
Like,
it's in
it's
the
in the
garage.
backyard. No, it was in the backyard. Like, they had to walk down a path through the yard to another building. Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't attached to the house. It's like, who? What? I'm like, in Chicago? Like, there's winter. Like, nobody's going outside and across the yard to do their laundry in the middle of winter. Like, no. I mean, it wasn't winter in this movie, it was fall, but
It wasn't
still,
even it
like,
wasn't even
it's
really,
just
because
an
it was filmed in
yeah,
California, so it was like pretend fall.
correct.
Yeah.
Fun fact, the guy that ended up playing Freddy Krueger,
Hmm.
was hired to sprinkle the set with fake fall
Fall
leaves
leaves. Yeah, there were no fall
to
leaves.
make it look like fall because it was a set in California, and it was supposed to be Halloween in Illinois. So the actor, the soon-to-be actor who played Freddy Krueger,
Hmm.
was like, I don't know what you call them, I guess a stagehand or something, to like throw the leaves out onto the set. I was like,
Yeah.
that's pretty funny.
Oh my gosh. Well,
All in the family.
I will say, so at the end of last episode, I was trying to figure out whether or not, like, what my rating for Friday the 13th was. And I was waiting to watch this one because in my mind, I was
Mm.
like, I think I like Halloween better than Friday the 13th. And both of these are like really kind of foundational, you know, kickstart movies to what would become like a really huge, franchise for each of them, and also just a huge trend to these kind of like slasher horror movies. And I will say that at the end of watching this one, I do think I am correct in my original assumption. I did like this one better, and I think we were chatting before we jumped on, which
Yeah.
we should just start recording early because we're both like, I have
I
all
know.
these ideas. But we were talking about the fact that this one actually really feels a lot more like a psychological serial killer movie than it
It's more of a
does a
psych thriller.
slasher
Yeah.
movie. And maybe that's why I like this one better.
Yeah.
I feel like I cared more about I feel like I understood the storyline of the babysitters better. Maybe I could just identify with, like,
Yeah.
I've babysat before. I've never been a camp counselor before, so I was like, I understood that vibe a little bit better. And then I also like Jamie Lee Curtis just nailed it as Laurie. So like I feel like I liked her. I knew she was gonna survive. There was just something about like the connection to the characters more, and even like Loomis, like Travis is saying, like, Loomis is, chasing Michael in part because of how long he took care of him, right? And so like he feels like he knows Michael better than anyone else, and he feels like he can stop him, which is
Yeah.
partially crazy, but partially like it makes him have a bit more of a storyline as well. Like I feel like there was more
Yeah.
character, I mean, to a point, but more
Development. Yeah.
character development in this one than there was in Friday the 13th. And I
For
just
sure.
find like, again, and part of this is why I probably like the follow-up Friday the 13th movies a lot better than the original, is that there's something almost, well, there's something supernatural about these characters, right? About Jason and
Yes.
Michael and Freddy and like all of these characters, right? And Michael in this movie is like both terrifying but also like doofy. Like he's like silly and kind of weird, and like there's like a scene in the
Almost
movie.
childlike still.
Yeah, he's still
Yeah.
childlike. Like there's a scene in the movie where he's like driving by in a car and he's like wearing this like creepy his Michael mask, and he just like clearly looks crazy. And then, like, and they, the babysitters are all like laughing and joking, and he hears them and like comes to like a screeching stop, and it's just kind of silly, and it sort of puts you at ease again. And then it amps up and makes you scared, and then it puts you at ease again, and then it amps up and makes you scared. And I like that journey. Like I really like the kind
Yeah.
of, I like feeling like a little bit okay for a bit. Like you're like, oh, but he's kind of an idiot. Like you should be able to get, and then you're like, no, he's crazy smart. Like he's coming for
He's
you.
hyper
Yeah.
intelligent. Like he stalks his prey.
Yeah.
He stalks so he stalks Lori, then he
Mm-hmm.
stalks the kid that she's going to be babysitting. So he
Yeah.
covers all the bases.
Yeah.
He knows not just the house that they're in, but the house that the neighbors are in where her
Yep.
friend is babysitting.
Yep.
When Lori goes to investigate, because she's like, now I'm seriously worried. She heard one of her friends die on the phone, which at first she thought it was a gag, but I gotta say, Lori's like spidey sense, like her gut feeling in this movie is off the charts. Because she always is like, she's at school at the beginning of the movie and she's not really paying attention to class or anything. She's doodling. And then she suddenly is like, and she looks outside and he's across the street staring at her. She looks away and then she looks back. He's not there.
Yeah.
And but then she's also able to answer the teacher's question like off the cuff and completely correctly. Like she's portrayed as like really good gut sense, really good reactions, quick thinking, and she's extremely intelligent. So when she goes to finally investigate where her friends are across the street, because she knows something's seriously wrong at this point,
Yeah.
she smartly locks the kids in the house
Yeah.
because also in this movie it seems that nobody in this neighborhood, and it's kind of a sign of the times, locked their
Yeah.
doors.
Yeah. Exactly.
So she was quite clever to lock the kids into the house so nobody can really theoretically get in. And when she's looking, he displays all of her three friends' bodies, almost in like shocking ways and in a booby trap kind of way. Like one of the bodies comes swinging down
Yeah. He's
and
taunting her.
to
Yeah.
scare her. It's super intelligent, like, and he also traps the house so she can't get out. He locks doors from the outside by putting stuff up against the door
Mm-hmm.
handles. He makes sure that she can't get out. Like, he set the house up for her to come and find her friends. Like,
Yeah. Which
it's
is,
very smart.
it is incredibly scary. And then there's also, it is that same trope. And so if you remember,
Yeah,
this movie was released 2 years prior to Friday the 13th, and Friday the 13th took a lot of notes, I guess, from this movie.
yeah,
So it like this concept of like the survivor, usually girl, so the survivor girl,
yeah,
woman, teenager, is the person who ends up kind of like, because the group gets separated, right? Like that's one of the main things that happens in these movies. It's like you have this larger group, they're all under
separate
attack,
them.
but they don't really realize it, and they inevitably are like separate themselves, and then they get picked off one by one. So by the time you get back to the survivor, like the one person that's going to make it all the way through, that person doesn't know what's going on for the most part. And
Yeah,
so there is this scene of like discovery of the bodies, and you're right. I think in this one it's like it comes across as much more like taunting and like, and yeah,
yeah.
like
She didn't stumble across them in the
she didn't
woods.
stumble across them in the woods. I mean,
It didn't
Friday
get
the 13th,
thrown through the front window for her
yeah,
to find. Like this, he literally displayed them. He
yeah,
stole his sister's tombstone from the cemetery to display over the head of her friend laid out in a cross on the bed.
yeah,
Like he set the scene
yeah,
to scare the shit out of this poor girl.
yeah,
Like he was going after her not just physically to kill her and her friends, but psychological torture along the way,
yeah,
which again makes it more for me a psychological thriller than a
yeah,
slasher. And
yeah.
like I had mentioned to you the other day, that I find that this movie and the first Friday the 13th together combined is what makes the, I suppose,
The
like,
formula for a slasher. Yeah,
for a slasher
yeah,
movie. It's not one or the other. It's like this one sets up the survivor girl and it sets up the dying by blades.
yeah. Without this one, there is
uh,
no Friday the 13th, and
exactly.
there is no slasher. Like,
Without Friday the
yeah,
13th and this combined.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I do love, so in typical slasher formula, like, Annie is the first one to die because she takes her top off. Right away, as soon as she took her top off, I'm like, oh, nipple, she dies first. That's the way it goes. And
yeah.
then I got excited when Linda and Bob came over to have sex. I was like, oh, maybe we'll get a double kill. We didn't. They died separately in this,
Mm,
but that does become a thing in movies that follow, where sometimes you'll get like a double or even a triple kill,
mm-hmm.
which is pretty exciting for a viewer.
We
He's like,
don't condone
whoa!
murder, but when we
No, no,
do,
no,
it's
no.
double or triple
In
kill.
slasher films only.
Yeah. And I will say, Travis, again, like killing it with these awesome points. So Travis for the win on this episode. But Travis said, like, which I think is an important part of this movie, like, none of Laurie's friends, like all of them, are smarmy and terrible. Like none of them are likable. So
Well,
at no
Bob is
point,
smarmy.
yeah,
Yeah.
but even like her other friends, like they're not
Yeah, Annie's
supportive
kind
of
of
her.
rude.
They're kind of rude. Like you get Travis is saying, you get the sense that Laurie isn't really actually friends with any of these people. She's sort of like
They
there
do
with
kind of pick
them.
on her
They pick on her a lot. So I feel
for
like
being
it makes
smart.
it almost gives you like permission to be A, rooting for Laurie, and
Yeah.
B, like not all that surprised or upset that all the other ones die. Like they're
Yeah,
kind
I
of
feel that
they're doing things that they
Carpenter
shouldn't be doing. Like they're not
yeah.
likable characters. So like in I guess in the in the framework of these kinds of movies, you're not as upset. Like it's not like when you're watching like a TV show, for example, and you've built up like whatever, a season or 2 seasons of of love for a particular character, whether they're a bad guy or a good guy. You have like an attachment to them, and then they get killed off and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm like distraught about this. Like these characters, you're like, clearly
Yeah.
they're not here to stay. They're not really likable. They're
They were
not.
written to be only
Yeah.
mildly acceptable, so that way
Yeah.
they're easy to die.
Yeah.
But
I will
I feel
say,
John Carpenter gave that moral
yeah, permission to,
okay
yeah,
to his audience with that. Like it
yeah.
was, yeah.
I
Which we
will
lose that in later films.
exactly. I will say that like when I was watching the scene where Michael has already killed Bob, which is great because that guy was a jerk,
Ugh.
and then Lindsay's like still in the bed waiting for Bob to come back, and Michael like shows up at the door and he's like in a ghost costume, like an old timey like sheet
Just
ghost
like a
costume,
white
a
sheet
white
with
sheet
Bob's glasses
with like holes, and
over
he's
the
got
eye
Bob's
hole.
glasses. And I texted Nat and I was like, I want to go as Michael Myers dressed as Bob for Halloween. This is what I want to be.
Yes.
Like, this is my new goal. Like, I
Which
just,
also, how clever is that? That he's
yeah.
like, you know what? I'm gonna go and mess with her for a little bit, and I'm gonna put this
Yeah.
Halloween costume on. I'm like, that's too much.
It's really
Mikey,
like,
take it down a notch.
it's
Like,
really like
just go and kill the
layered
kids.
because it's like creepy. It's
Yeah, yeah,
toying.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
really smart, but it's also still really childlike. Like, and again, Travis,
Yeah.
again, with
Well, I
the
mean, he's 21, but
amazing insights, says Michael has the mentality and curiosity of a child while
yeah,
also being able to think outside the box like one, and lacking any sense of self-preservation that a younger child might have. Like he is definitely developmentally delayed, right? Like he's
yeah.
been in a mental institution for the entire time. He had a crazy traumatic experience. He was a crazy traumatic experience. So he
Yeah,
does
it's like,
have
well,
that kind of he
he
has
was
like that
the trauma.
child that he has that childish spirit, which
That
and I
playfulness that he's playing like an animal, like a
yeah.
cat playing with a mouse.
It's like a cat playing with a mouse. And it's funny, not funny, but it's interesting because I feel like a lot of horror movies in other genres have, especially like the kind of like The Ring, for example, or like some of these other movies often will have like creepy kids in them. And I feel
Yeah.
like there's something inherently terrifying about like flipping kind of the purity and innocence of a child into this like dark place. And I feel like they
Yeah.
do that with Michael, only he's tall and an adult and like really imposing and you can't fight back. So it is an interesting layer to the entire movie, and I think to his
I have to
character.
say, when you knew things were going to start getting stabby, when
Stabby's coming.
it's so now it's dark and like kids have been trick-or-treating for a while and now it's pretty dark out, so it's a bit later,
Mhm.
and you see these kids are crossing the street saying trick or treat whatever, but they make it into this creepy little song. I'm like, children should not be allowed to sing things that should just be normal and in movies, because it makes it super creepy. I'm like, oh, now people will start dying because these kids were just creepy without realizing it. And this is where people die.
They knew how creepy they were being. Yeah, which is a good time to bring up, and I'm again impressed with myself. I'm gonna take all my credit tonight
Yes.
with noticing or feeling this, but I and I don't think I noticed this the first however many times I've seen this movie, but the use of, and I called this, but you corrected me in your
Well,
obsessive rewatching, but the use
yes.
of music and sound and lack of sound, or when you were
Or
playing, it's not just like the
volume.
volume of the sound.
Yeah.
I think is really clever in this movie. And I can't
Yes.
think of, and granted, I'm sure we'll rewatch a bunch of them, but I can't think of another movie that does it as well as this movie does, where you
Yeah.
you are subconsciously and sometimes consciously tracking where Michael is and whether or not he's in the scene based on the volume and the music and the kind of music. And it's like leading up to like there might be a jump scare, it might get really scary, and then like just kidding, he's gone. Like and it's like I think it's really clever because it's a way of building suspense, but it's not just sort of the typical way of doing it. And it like there's a lot of moments that feel very quiet, like too quiet, and it's just making you kind
Yes.
of wonder what's going to happen. And then the music gets really loud and you like think something's going to happen, and then it backs off. And I think it is really like it is
Also
a
how
really
they
interesting use of it.
Yeah, they break down the theme song. I call it the villain theme song. So in slashers, like I mentioned,
Yeah, each character gets their
Dave
own
Voorhees,
song.
like
Yeah.
you know he's coming when you hear the cha 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 and then this one, Mikey has his own little thing too. He has his theme song, so you know he's about to get stabby when you hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And um, with this, like we first hear it after 6-year-old Michael kills his sister, but it's almost childlike. It's being played on a piano, but you could hear like the person playing it's like sort of hitting more than one key, like their fingers are slipping, very childlike, and
Mm-hmm.
then it progresses. And it takes different pitches too, depending what it is. When he's stalking the kid outside of the elementary school, and another kid bumps into him, it gets really loud and aggressive, but
Yeah.
very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's um, stalking one of the girls before he kills them, it sort of breaks it up into pieces. When Laurie's looking through the house to try and find her friends, like you hear different parts of the theme, the villain theme, like broken up as she's getting closer to finding like the third body, it's more whole. And then when
Mm-hmm.
he's there, the theme song is complete. Like
Yeah.
it's really interesting. And then I love, like you were saying, when it's his point of view, they do this cool thing where the camera's like just over his shoulder or inside of his
Yeah.
mask.
Yeah.
And it's like the surrounding environment is quieter and his breathing is louder. So
Yeah,
it
you feel
puts
like
you in this yeah.
you're in his head, and unlike Friday the 13th, which has a lot of that, like it has a lot of like you can hear the killer's breathing, you're sort of from the perspective
Yeah.
of the killer. This one has a mix of both, right? Because you're
Yeah.
both sometimes from the perspective of Michael, but sometimes you're trying to find where he is in the scene, because like the kid, Tommy's like, I see him, and then like you're looking for him, but then he's gone, and Laurie's like, there's no one there, and
Yeah.
like, but then like you see him like off in the corner, and again the music kind of triggers you to be looking for him. And it like
Yeah.
and he's again it sort of puts you a little bit at ease, because he's kind of stupid looking. Like he's not scary. He's wearing, and I think Dan mentioned it earlier, but for those of you who are not aware, he's wearing a stretched out Captain
Captain
Kirk
Kirk.
mask, like in real
I
life.
love
Like not
it.
this mask is just like a like
It's
bleached, like
literally a Captain
stretched
Kirk
out
mask.
Captain Kirk mask. So he looks
Yeah.
somewhat ridiculous. He's like silly looking. So he's not like terror. So it kind of like puts you at ease, but doesn't, and he's like kind of silly and slow move, like all the other ones. It's not like he's not like running at people or like running at you with a knife. Like he's moving sort of like slowly, and then he's
Yeah.
gone, and you don't know where. Like it's more in the sort of suspense of it all, and I think the music plays a really big part in that, which is great.
Doc has a great comment. He
Yeah.
says it's music theory time. They used
Mhm.
D minor inversions to build the tension and fear,
It
which,
works.
yes, like it was super good. It was, and apparently John Carpenter wrote like the score in like 3 days or something
Yeah.
by himself. He like locked himself away and he's like, this is what it's going to be. I'm like, could you imagine doing that in 3 days and it's still today like something used in like
Well,
in Halloween movies?
he also, like, if we're diving into some fun facts about this movie, like he wrote this movie with his then girlfriend, and like they did it on like
In
a
like 2
budget of
weeks.
basically nothing, and it made
Yeah.
an insane amount of money. Like it was like, not only was it like crazy successful, but obviously it like spawned an entire genre. They're still making Halloween movies today. Like
Yeah, I think one came out just last year. Was
yes.
it last Halloween or the Halloween
I
before?
think it was last Halloween. I still haven't seen that one. I'm gonna have to catch up and watch that one. But yeah, it is kind of fun to see that like good good like storytelling and a different kind of unique idea is, can carry a film even when it's really low budget. It
Yeah,
was so low budget that Jamie Lee Curtis had to buy all of her own clothes. She spent
yeah,
$100 at J.C. Penney. Do you remember J.C. Penney? J.C. Penney
yeah,
to for her whole wardrobe, which I think is just hilarious. But yeah.
yeah. Can we talk about for a moment how, I mean, regardless of whatever, so Michael seems very human. In this movie, it's like a kid who has this psychotic break and then he develops into his sociopathy and
Mhm.
psychopathy. But he's also apparently superhuman
Yeah.
because
He doesn't die.
so he
He never
finally
dies.
attacks Jamie Lee Curtis. He finally goes
Mhm.
to stab her with a knife. I'm like, but how did you miss? He's like 7 feet tall and silent as like dust on the wind. Okay.
Mhm.
And he misses her. She grabs a knitting needle because she's survivor girl and
Yep.
has she doesn't need to find a weapon. She uses whatever's handy.
Yep.
She stabs him in the carotid artery. He'd bleed out in what, like maybe a minute?
He's just fine.
He's fine.
He also
And
gets
then
shot
she
like many, many times at the end
Six,
after being
6 times.
stabbed and
I
is still
counted
fine.
the
Yeah.
movie. Apparently, John Carpenter said he only got shot 5 times, but I was like, 6? I watched it like
You're like
5
you're like,
times
I counted
yesterday
it.
to make sure I counted it. He got shot 6 times, which I love. It's like the doctor goes to look over the balcony and he's just gone.
Hmm.
Happy little theme song. Like,
Yeah.
he's superhuman. He gets his eye like raked with a wire coat
I
hanger.
don't I don't like so okay, this was like one of my so
Oh,
I'm going to
this
get
was
in
my
for a
deep
second.
dive.
So I have again, I was very observant this time around. So come with me on this journey. So Michael Myers is finally going after Laurie. He's killed off all of her babysitter friends and he's in the house and he's got his knife, his giant knife, and he goes to stab her. She knitting needles him. He drops the knife. She picks up the knife and then she like doesn't check on him, which like why though? She runs upstairs to go and get the kids to make sure that the kids get out. So she
She
runs to
didn't pick up that knife. Didn't she
she
leave
did.
that?
She picked up the knife for like a
Oh,
minute, but then when you see her upstairs with the kids,
she
she
doesn't
doesn't
have the
have the
knife.
knife.
Yeah.
And then of course he catches up to them and so then she locks herself in the closet and hides the kids. And so this she doesn't have a weapon. He's got a knife, so you're like, "Oh, okay, he somehow she lost the knife and he picked it up again. That's weird, but okay." So he's got the knife again. And
It's
at
a
this point,
different knife.
yeah, so it ends up being a totally different knife. But I don't buy that like she takes a wire hanger. I have these wire hangers, right? Like the wire is so malleable that you can like do whatever. Like I
Yeah, what
believe
yeah.
that I believe that you could like if you were like close, you held it like really close and you tried to like jab someone, you might break the skin. But I think if you had it like as long as she did and you ran at someone, it would just bend. Like I don't think it would cause the like it wouldn't have hurt him. There was no way that that would have hurt. Like even if she went at his eye, like it's not going in there. Like those things are just bending and like they're floppy. They're like the most malleable possible
Yeah.
metal. But anyway, fine. She does that and she like attacks him. But then at the very end of the movie, like, after he's been killed
She
and isn't
stabs him
actually
right,
killed,
like, under the
she's
ribs too,
yeah,
which should
she
have
gets
got
the
him in the
knife
heart,
back again
honestly.
and she stabs him again and then Loomis comes in to save the day and he shoots him 6 times, and he goes flying out. Then they do this slow camera view of the whole house, which is actually awesome and like really, interesting.
Yeah.
But then it scans the living room where she had like her knitting needle moment with Michael and the knife is just laying there. So you're like, what? Where is he getting all of these knives from? Like,
Well, they
it's
did
like laying
say
there. Why didn't he pick that one back up? Like both of them just left that knife there and he went and got a different knife and she wasn't able to get out in that time. I
they
don't know.
did say when the convenience store, the general store was robbed, that several knives and a mask were
Oh, so
missing.
like, so you think he just had like multiple knives on him, and he just like walked over that knife and just pulled out another one? That was
I'm
that's the
stretching. I'm
okay.
stretching on that one. So
Oh.
so this also now brings us to this scene that has great debate on the internet.
Yeah.
Lori, when she's frantically trying to fight him off because he
Mm-hmm.
resurrects himself now for what, the third time,
Mm-hmm.
he um she knocks his mask off for a second and you see, and this is where his child like he freezes, like he's not,
He's
he's
disarmed.
not He's not the Shape. So in the credits, he's there's 2 actors that play
There's
Michael Myers, or 3
3
actors that play
actors that
Michael
play him
Myers.
in
There's the
this one
6-year-old,
movie. Yeah.
the 21-year-old, and
And the face
then
actor.
so there's the face actor, and then the one that is running around and killing
Mhm.
people. So when you see the face, he's not the Shape anymore. Okay, so the one murdering people was credited as the Shape, and it's supposed to represent that he's the shape of evil, like he's just an embodiment of evil,
Mhm.
nothing else.
Mhm.
So this has led people to believe that he has no motivation for his killing because he's just the embodiment of evil.
Which, yeah,
That
I just
aside,
don't.
we see his face. It looks like he's had a severe cerebral hemorrhagic stroke because his left side of his face
It's
is
droopy.
droopy.
Yeah. Hmm.
So of course, the internet, which I'm like, we can still frame everything nowadays. Most people seem to believe that he's not at all disfigured. And I'm like, I beg your pardon. And of course, John Carpenter and Tony Morano, who played the face actor, said no, he wasn't disfigured at all. It was just where she had cut him with the wire coat hanger.
Yeah, which again is not possible.
But his face was droopy. Like it had sags. I'm like, I immediately, my first thought was, well, it's, he was hospitalized in a mental institution a la One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, like
Mhm.
in the 60s and 70s for like almost 2 full decades. And so, like, clearly he must have had some sort of electrotherapy mishap or something. He probably stroked out at some
You're like,
point.
this is
No,
Loomis's fault.
it's just, yeah, I'm like, well, Loomis has made him this way. No, no,
Oh,
no, it's just a bad prosthetic, apparently.
yeah.
But what drives me insane is that so many people online, like, popular opinion is that he's not even disfigured at all. It's just you're misseeing it.
Well, part of it, and Travis just asked a few minutes ago, whether or not we've seen the sequels. Yes, we have seen all of the
Yes,
sequels except the most recent one
except
that
for the
just came
most
out.
recent.
But and
Even H2O.
I think part of what you're saying too is that many people, and even when we were looking for facts for this movie, like
Mm,
a lot of the facts for this movie are facts for the whole franchise, and it's
series,
similar.
yeah.
It is similar for Friday the 13th. But one of the problems with that, and maybe this internet belief comes out of that in a bit, is that the first movies of both of these franchises are very different than the ones that followed. Neither of these original movies thought that there would be any sequels. Friday the 13th's creators didn't even want there to be a sequel. Halloween's creators were lucky to get this movie made and definitely did not think that there would be sequels. So by the time that they actually came around to making sequels, they both movies really had to shift what the entire storyline was, right? So you went from in
Yeah,
Friday the 13th, you went from it being Jason's mom to actually Jason, and there was and then the story shifted, and like in many cases doesn't make any sense. And Halloween is even crazier. Like it goes
I
like
believe in the
characters die,
second
characters
movie.
come back for life. They completely reset the movies in like the
Yeah,
early 2000s. Like it, so part of
even
it
in the
might just
second
be
Halloween 2.
yeah,
Halloween 2, they couldn't figure out how to get Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael Myers back together,
yeah,
so they made Laurie his sister
yeah.
in the second
They
movie, which
they can
makes no sense because it has nothing to do with the first movie.
yeah.
And
So
I think Doc pointed out that he has Bell's palsy. I'm like, "Isn't that in the Rob Zombie movies?" Like, I don't know if that's in the John Carpenter movies. I'm
yeah.
pretty I Doc will correct me for
They're
sure.
all like part of
Um,
my issue is that it's been so long since I've seen all of them kind of in order, like did like a full sit
I
down
haven't
binge.
seen them consecutively.
So it's like they're all kind of blended together in my head. But I think the important thing is it's like um a lot of the kind of discussion is looking at it from the lens of the entire series, but the series itself
Yeah,
is problematic because they're constantly changing what the story is to be able to
yeah,
release more movies. So I think it's yeah. So Travis says, based on the 2018 trilogy, my interpretation is that any power he gets from killing is taken away the moment the mask comes off and doesn't come back
yeah,
again until he kills again, making him weakened, unmasked. Right? Like totally. And a lot of that mythology is built into the movies later to try to explain the fact that this guy just doesn't die because they like him and they want to keep making movies with him. So I think a lot of it probably is that, because I think you're right. If you're looking at it just from the frame this one movie, I completely agree with you that I think I imagine the intention of the writers originally was that he was this like very damaged kid from this one situation. He obviously had like all the markers to be able to do this. He snapped, he did this, and then he's just been like again like 70s mental institution, which was like not a positive space at the time. So like it got
70s,
yeah,
like
right?
for
It got
sure they
way
had him
worse.
on LSD for treatment,
Yeah, who
and they
knows
had
what.
him
Yeah.
like this poor kid was probably
I know we're
like
like
he's
Team
practically a
Michael.
toddler and he was probably tripping balls.
Yeah.
So Doc said he was joking about the Bell's palsy thing, so I quickly did a search because I'm like, no, he had something, a diagnosis in the Rob Zombie movies. So in 2007, 2008, Rob Zombie from a metal band,
Hmm.
phenomenal film
Hmm.
writer director, by the way. If you want to be disgusted and horrified, watch a Rob Zombie horror movie. They're so good. But I don't count these as part of this franchise because it takes it to a whole other place.
Yeah.
And they are actually like the first Halloween that Rob Zombie did was probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Um, he does have a diagnosis called catatonia, and he exhibits stupor, like certain like phases of stupor. Anyways, he has like an inherited disorder.
Okay.
So he does have like disability in the Rob Zombie ones, but not in these ones. It was just a bad prosthetic, guys. According to the actor Tony Morano, who played the face.
He got a whole $250 for that. It was just like he's
Yeah, it took
winning.
apparently like an hour, 4 takes, and he
Mhm.
got $250.
Hey, not bad.
He
Not
did
bad
have to
pay.
cover his head in Vaseline so that
Ooh,
when Jamie Lee
poor guy.
Curtis knocked the mask off, it went smoothly.
Yeah.
And he said it was a huge pain in the butt to take the Vaseline out of his hair after, but he got $250.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
As part of the franchise, I need to give a shout out to a fun fact that Halloween Part 6 was Paul Rudd's first big screen
Let's
part.
just
I
all
don't know.
watch that one over and over again.
Yeah.
Just for Paul Rudd. Just the moment of it. Yeah, it I just and thank goodness for this movie because Jamie Lee Curtis is like one of my
Dear God.
like just she's an icon and
She's the original Scream Queen,
she's
for
the
sure.
original Scream Queen.
She defined
Without
it.
her, I feel like without her, without this movie, like one of my favorite like Halloween horror movies is Scream. I love the entire Scream series. I even like the new ones, even though they're terrible compared to the original. But I think like again, without these two original movies, we would not have clever movies like Scream. And I just love the kind of
Yeah.
continuation of this. Just like sometimes it's just fun to be scared, but in a way that
Yeah.
is I don't know. Yeah, like this and maybe it's just me and my weird personality, but to me these movies feel less scary than some of the like psychological thrillers out there, than some of the than the religious ones, which I personally find
Yeah.
much scarier. So like there's something kind of just like light and silly about these, and I think a lot of it is because these main characters just seem like supernatural, like they're like indestructible, they
Yeah,
can't die,
definitely.
like so part of that is just like kind of takes away from the scariness of them, which makes it a more fun experience for me, where I'm just like, oh yeah, he's just gonna walk around slashing people no matter how fast they run, he's gonna catch them, like they're gonna like he's gonna fall over and still be fine to catch them,
They're
and
gonna
that makes
nuke
it
the
fun.
town and
Yeah,
he'll still
he'll be
live.
fine. He'll be fine. We'll see him again next movie. Like we always know there's like
There's
one of them that's
definitely
gonna
gonna be a
live.
movie
Yeah.
that's gonna have resurrection in the title. Like,
Hmm.
don't worry.
Yeah. Exactly. There's something there, and it's funny because in reading like all of the fun facts about this movie, or even just like about this franchise or this style of movie, they were saying that this was really novel in some ways and kind of came out
Yeah.
of the horrific truth of the 70s, bringing us a ton of actual serial killers, right? So there was
Yeah.
something kind of novel and different in this, because prior to this, the scary movies that existed were like very, I don't know what the right word is, like this one, it's like anyone could be killed is the idea in these
Yeah.
movies, right? Like there's no you know, a serial killer could have a type, right? Like in this one, it's like babysitters, like, right? Women. He's going after women. He's going after babysitters. Like, whereas before that, I feel like there was like, before kind of the rise of serial killers, murders felt very different than afterwards. And so I think there's something kind of random and scary about the fact that it could be anyone, it could be any town. There's not a reason. Like
Yeah.
it's not like a revenge thing. You did something, someone's coming after you. It could happen to
It's
anyone, and
not as personal.
it's not
Yeah.
as personal.
It's
Yeah,
not
and
personal motivation. Like the victims don't have a
a
personal
connection.
stake
Yeah,
in, yeah.
exactly. Like Lori
Yeah.
had no, other than what later when she's his sister, quote unquote. But in this one, she had no connection to him, right? Like she did all of the right things. She was like a good
Babysitting in the
babysitter.
wrong town.
Yeah,
That's
she was
it.
just like wrong, yeah, wrong time, wrong place, right? But yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. And now it's like, you know, with the rise of kind of true crime podcasts and serial killer documentaries and whatever, we kind of we're so like in that space that I think it's not as kind of novel to us looking back at this. But at the time, like
Yeah.
that was, I mean, there were like every serial killer that we're now watching documentaries about, like they were like killing people in the
Yeah.
70s and early 80s. So like this, when this
Yeah.
came out, like this was doubly scary because of what the world was like at that time, like what America was like at that time. Like there was
Yeah.
Ted
I
Bundy
mean,
was killing people at this time, right? Like so it was a deal. It was
Summer
a
of
big deal.
Sam, where
Yeah.
people were dyeing their hair not to fit the
Yeah.
killer's
Yeah.
profiles and
Exactly.
hiding and locking themselves in at home in New York City in the dead heat of the summer. Like it's yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Doc says Mike had a Ed Kemper vibe. Yeah. Like there's he kind of
Likes the co-eds.
embodies he embodies, I think, even slightly more than some of the other ones in this grouping. I think he just embodies that kind of serial killer vibe, which hey, maybe that's why I'm like in my true
Sociopath,
crime phase,
psychopath.
so maybe that's why he's my favorite out of all of these. But
Yeah, I have to say one scene that I really liked at the beginning of the movie, after little Mikey kills his sister. He comes outside, he's in his clown costume, he lifts his mask, his parents come home, and they go up to him and they're like, Michael? And he's standing there holding the knife up.
covered in blood. Yeah.
And yeah, and his parents are sort of leaning over him, and the camera just keeps panning back, panning back. So then you see like the whole house, and it's panning further back, and it's like a still frame, except you could see the kid's hand waver, so the knife is glinting,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody else is really actually moving. I thought that
Mm-hmm.
was it was super creepy because it's like it's going further back, and you think it's like the frame froze, but really it's just like the kid is actually like wiggling the knife, so it's glinting off the moonlight, so
Yeah.
to speak. But it
That,
was
I
like
mean, that
that was
whole
nice and
first
creepy. It
scene was
was a
really
very beautifully shot.
like, I mean, the whole movie had great cinematography, I think, but the whole first scene, and again, kind of from my perspective, the sound of it all, like it's all again from within his mind, right? Like it's muffled, it's really
His point of
quiet.
view, yeah.
You're kind of like, oh, like should I be turning this up? Like it's a very jarring first scene for any movie, and I think it
Yeah.
kind of puts you into the space where you're like, what is happening here?
Also, the
Like,
shock to find out that it's like a little
the shock to
6-year-old
find out
kid.
that it's a kid. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's
And also
almost,
we have to sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's a reverse of Friday the 13th, where it takes you all the way to the very end to figure out who it is. In this one, we
Yeah.
start off knowing the story and then are kind of trying to figure out like not exactly why he's doing it, but like if you're gonna discover any more backstory about him, if he's connected to any of these women that he's killing, like you're kind of like watching it, but again, you find it out right at the beginning versus Friday the 13th, where you don't know who it is or what's happening until the very end. You're just like, what is going on?
Yeah, also we need to say that Jamie Lee Curtis basically acted this whole movie without a scene partner by herself.
Yeah.
She occasionally had
At
scenes with her
19.
friends, occasionally had scenes with kids, and occasionally had scenes with the killer, but most of the movie she carried just by herself, like in a room.
Yeah.
It was so good and so well done. Like she really is just such a phenomenal actor, and I find in this movie almost more than any other movie she's in, it displayed how good her acting is. And of
Yeah.
course she's good in everything,
Yeah.
but in this, like, it just shows that from such a young age. I mean, she had good acting chops in her DNA, but
Mm-hmm.
regardless, she really was very good in her own right.
So I knew that her dad was Tony Curtis, but I didn't realize that her
Yeah.
mom is also famous too. So that was pretty cool to because
Yeah.
that had some of the fun facts. So
I love Tony Curtis is in one of my favorite movies of all time, Some Like It Hot, which if you haven't seen it, it's an old Marilyn Monroe, Tony
mm,
Curtis movie. So funny. One of the funniest movies. I
so
quote it all the time. Nobody gets it
so
anymore.
I'm there with you.
Think I'm funny. I'm like, I'm not. I'm like, Jack Lemmon's funny. I'm not funny.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
we did it. We got all the way to the very end. I
Yay.
love that even though we changed the night, people still found us. I
Yeah,
promise
thanks,
next time we
guys.
will be back on track. So this week we were Tuesday, Friday. Next week we will be back on track with Thursday. So we normally hang out Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube is where we do a live recording. But if you miss it, there's always a replay. And obviously we're available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make sure you add us in, like and follow. And we have an insane list of movies. There's so many movies from the 80s, 90s, and today, quote unquote, that we're working our way through. But if you have a favorite movie, let us know what it is so that we can hopefully add it into our list if we don't have it there already, or move it up because now we know it's your favorite. We got to bump it up in our list. But hey, we're still not at
Yeah.
Halloween, Nat. We still have one more episode prior to
I
Halloween.
know.
So what do we think we're doing next?
I don't know. Maybe Hocus Pocus?
Yeah, we did talk about Hocus Pocus. I think Hocus Pocus would be a good one. And we haven't given our potato review yet for this one. What
Oh,
is
yeah.
everyone thinking? So if you're hanging out with our live studio audience, drop in your potato rating, and if you're watching us later, let us know in the comments what you think of this one. I had a hard time rating both of these ones because
Same.
there's just like like it's there's we normally rate from like gut feeling, so I can't say that these are overly
I think
scientific.
it's again, I think same as Friday the 13th. I kind of based it on the fact that this is still it's not just a franchise of movies, it's a legacy and it's
Yeah,
built this whole genre.
yeah.
So I feel like it has to have the same rating as our Friday the 13th. So for me it's 5 taters because it really like we wouldn't have Scream Queens without Jamie Lee Curtis.
It's very true. Yep.
We wouldn't have, villain POVs and theme songs if it wasn't for John Carpenter. Like it's really this movie is just so solid in building this franchise.
I'm muting that for a sec. we're going over. We're going over here to our potato rating. We are at five potatoes. Hank gave it 4 only because he got here late. Okay,
Fair,
you're
Hank.
you're allowed your gut feeling rating system. If we have our feeling rating system, then you can have yours. Yeah, I agree. I had a really hard time with this one. I think I like Halloween better. At least I like the first Halloween better than I like the first Friday the 13th. But I really just love both franchises better because I
Yeah.
love kind of how comical and ridiculous they get while still also being scary. Like even though you know the formula and you know what's going to happen in all of them, there's still something like scary about them, and yet they're still disarming enough that you feel like okay to watch it if you're a wimp. Like they're just like a really nice, I don't know, they're nicely done as far as yeah. All right. Hey, Travis. Travis is the opposite, which I totally respect. Travis says, I respect this movie, but I feel many of the sequels improved tremendously upon this one, and many things have
Yeah.
aged like milk. 2 for Travis. I love it. Travis is a discerning
I did
reviewer.
I was telling Katie that I definitely don't feel that this movie is technically a slasher. I feel it's definitely more of a psychological thriller
Yeah.
than a slasher because it introduces the genre of slasher. But it's still closer, I find, to Psycho, say, than
Yeah.
Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
So it's harder to rate, but it's like we needed this movie to get anywhere else. with the
That is
genre.
very true. That's very true. Maybe we'll have to get harder with our ratings, Nat. We'll have to have Travis. We
I'm
can
an
give our
emotional
rating, and then
person.
Travis can give the like actual rating. We'll have to make sure that you're here every week, Travis, to give the realistic rating. That like this is the
Yeah.
Katie and Nat, and this is the Travis. Yeah, no, I think it. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard because even the movies that are terrible or you like really don't enjoy, like at this point so many, like if we're gonna watch it, it's probably iconic enough that there's
Mhm.
still value in it, which then I think makes it difficult to rate. So yeah, I don't know, we'll see. It's a good.
Well, we
I
did
think your
cover
feedback is good.
Hamlet 2000,
We
which
did
was
cover Hamlet
trash.
2000, and that one was not good. So
Good.
we're open to more terrible movies to really round off some of these overly positive reviews.
Yes.
I think that's great. Doc gives it 5 au gratin for slicing and cheesiness, which I'm into. I love it. I think that's fantastic. I think it's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm totally in the Halloween spirit, and I love it. And my almost his birthday husband is here hanging out with us in the chat, and he hates horror movies. So I often only watch these now by myself because Nat lives too far away. So there's something like, for me, it's just so, it's a part of my like, not childhood, but a part of my teenagerhood. Like
Yeah.
this is like for me, like sleepovers and just
Too much
hanging,
candy.
way too much candy and popcorn, and I don't care if I spill butter on myself. I'm not washing my clothes outside. But yeah, I don't know. There's something really nostalgic about these movies in particular that always kind of take me back to that time where it's like the first time of watching them, where it was like scary but okay because I was in a large enough group that we could be silly about it, and I think it was great. So
Yeah, Dane did put up with us once, and we went to see a horror movie with him
we
just
went to see The
once.
Ring with Dana. Now he'll
Yeah.
never watch another horror movie with us again.
No. I I mean, that was definitely the point where I'm like, he loves her because he put up with the shit, and he clearly hated every second of it.
Oh.
Not
Find
because it's
someone
scary, just because he thinks it's dumb. But
Find
yeah,
someone who will watch the horror movies with you, even though it makes them angry. That's who you need to
yeah,
find.
yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thanks
Well,
everybody.
thanks for hanging out. Thanks for hanging out, Nat. You really dove deep this time. You did a lot of like pausing and rewinding. It was very VHS of you. I'm feeling good about it.
Very.
All right. Well, Hocus Pocus next week, which I'm right there in because I just rewatched this one recently with the kids. They saw it for the first time, and I took them to Salem, Massachusetts. So I'm like, I'm ready. I'm ready to dive into that one. If it's one of your favorites, let us know. It will be super fun to hang out with and watch with everyone. We'll see you all next week, Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Otherwise, wherever and whenever you watch or listen to podcasts. We'll see you next time.